Great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening for the information session on Rising Sophomore Housing Selection. We'll get started here in a few minutes. You are welcome to leave your camera on or off, whatever's most comfortable for you all. But I would ask that you do, at the very least, mute your microphones. That will allow us to have a enjoyable time together this evening. Just wait a few moments here, see if anyone else pops in. All right, I will keep an eye on that as we go, but we will go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for joining us this evening to talk more about the Rising Sophomore Housing Selection process. My name is Tim Griffin. I serve as the Assistant Director for Housing Operations here at Xavier. I have been in this role for a few years now. And perhaps if you joined us for a previous info session, as you were coming on boarding to Xavier, we likely look familiar to you.
Yes, and my name is Lori Lambert. I am the Senior Director for Student Affairs and oversee residence life. And we're glad to have you with us tonight. Hopefully we can answer some questions and demystify this whole process for you.
So here's a snapshot of what we'll be talking about this evening. We'll go a little bit more about into the housing timeline and various aspects of the process. And particularly going to spend some time focusing on some changes that we've made this year based on previous years of student feedback about Justice Hall Suites. So we will make sure to be covering that as well. As you have questions, please feel free to use the chat function to enter those questions. And then as we get towards the end, we will make sure to answer any questions that you might have. As a reminder, this session is also being recorded, so it will be posted online and sent out in other ways once it has concluded as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim. First, I'd like to review the Xavier's on-campus living requirement, which states that all unmarried incoming students aged 17 to 21 who are not living with their legal guardian or family who live within beyond a 35-mile radius are required to live on campus for their first 2 years at the university. And so all of you who are first-year students signed this housing agreement when you first moved onto campus. And I'd just like to also talk about why Xavier has this requirement. The university has done research, and the research shows that students who live on campus are more involved with campus activities. They're likely to have a higher GPA than students who live off campus. They're more likely to be retained at the university, and they are more likely to graduate from Xavier. And thus, the university has invested a lot of financial resources in our residential facilities, and we do that so that you can live on campus for the first 2 years with us. After that, you are not required to live on campus and are permitted to move off campus your junior and senior year. If you do live within that 35-mile radius and have a family member there and you've changed your mind and you would like to commute, you just need to complete the request for release form, and that is available on Housing Self-Service. And we'll give that web address later in the presentation. If that is approved, you will not be charged the $1,000 cancellation fee.
So this is really a date-driven process, so feel free to take a picture of this slide. Again, this will also be posted after the presentation as well, but it's really important to be keeping track of the various dates that are involved for Rising Sophomore Housing Selection, because one thing sort of leads to the next step, which leads to the next step, so it's really, really helpful to make sure you're doing things as they fall. The housing application is currently open on Housing Self-Service, as well as roommate pairing will be opening on My College Roomie for those first folks that have completed their housing application. And those are really the first two steps in the process. We'll go into more details about each of those. The first deadline for the process is coming up on Friday, February 9th, and that's for students who believe they have some sort of potential medical need for a housing accommodation. We'll talk a little bit more about the housing accommodation process that's overseen by Accessibility and Disability Resources in a few slides coming up here as well. We will be hosting a what we're calling a Muskie Matchup event on Thursday, February 15th at 6 p.m. in the Clock Tower Lounge of Gallagher Student Center. And so that's an opportunity for students who are perhaps trying to find a roommate, perhaps they're trying to find someone to round out their group that they're planning to form, as an opportunity just to connect with fellow Musketeers who are maybe still considering what their roommates and group options might be. So if that's of interest to you, we will be hosting that event. We've got some other options for you to consider coming up here as well. The first deadline of the Rising Sophomore Housing Selection process occurs on Monday, February 19th, when the housing application is due. And so that housing application will close on that date at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. So it's really important that every student involved has completed their application by then. The roommate group formation deadline is then the next morning, which will close at 10 a.m. And then from there, the rest of the process sort of unfolds. But those first two dates of February 19th and 20th are certainly ones to make sure that you've noted. Moving forward from there, we're going to talk a little bit in a minute about the changes made for Justice Hall suites of 6 and 8 students. So those students will be getting notified later that week in February, along with other students receiving their room selection times. We are hoping to have some sort of residential area tour also on the 22nd to allow students the opportunity to see some of the various spaces that are options for them. And then the actual room selection, picking of space, will occur on Monday, February 26th and Tuesday, February 27th during a student's assigned room selection time.
I want to highlight a couple things that Tim said, and that was the deadline of Monday, February 19th. Just for your information, over 200 students have already completed this step, which that's awesome. They've got a head start on it. But I would just encourage people not to wait till the deadline. I can't tell you how many times people walk in the day of and say, oh, my computer died or something happened. Just go ahead and get it done now. That way you don't have to worry about that deadline. So don't wait till the last minute. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. I would like to talk a little bit about housing accommodations. So this is a process which is not overseen by our office. Instead, we work with accessibility and disability resources to facilitate this. And it is a two-step process for students who have a medical or mental health reason as to why they need housing accommodations. For many students, they've already gone through this for their first year at Xavier, and it's just a matter of redoing the form. It's a shorter form the second time around. But if something new has occurred that makes you believe that you need housing accommodations, you will need to complete the housing accommodation form, and then you will need to have an accommodation planning meeting. The deadline is Friday, February 9th. So again, I encourage you to do it ASAP because that office will need to meet with everybody who completes those forms. So do it as soon as possible. And you will go to the Accessibility and Disability Resources website to complete that paperwork. As you can see, the link is there at the bottom. The other thing is that you also need to go ahead and do your application and go ahead and complete your roommate pair. Because if you're approved for it, we need it. And if you're not approved for it, you need it. So just go ahead and do that. You just have 2 extra steps compared to other students who might not be filing for housing accommodations. One other thing I would add to that, any housing assignments for this will be based upon need as determined by the Office of Accessibility and Disability Resources. So you might think that living in Justice Hall would be the best location for you, but your needs might be met by living in a different building. And so we really take the lead from the ADR office, and they will tell us where you need to be, what location will meet your needs. So housing self-service, you have probably gotten used to using this in the first year housing selection process. Or if you are one of the people who's already completed your housing application, this probably looks familiar to you. So you'll go to this link, and this is where you can apply. And it's also where you will go in on your day to select a space. You will select at this location. Once you do an application, about 24 hours later, you're going to get a link sent to you from My College Roomie, which is a roommate pairing app. And it really does help students to find each other to make a good match. And so you will make your roommate group there, not on Housing Self-Service, but at My College Roomie. So you're going to have to go into two different links. And then there's a lot of, Tim has developed so many great handouts and instructions for you. And you will be able to link to those through Housing Self-Service. I will tell you that almost every question that we get in our office can be answered by looking at those instructions and reading through the information that's provided. Certainly, sometimes people have a unique situation. So I would just ask people to please go ahead and read the instructions, read through everything. And if you can't find your answer, then go ahead and reach out to us. We're glad to answer the questions, but a lot of times people are panicking at 10 o'clock at night when we're not around. Go to these documents and they will help you.
So we're going to spend a few more minutes talking through the housing application. Again, that is the first step in this housing selection process, is something that all students must complete, whether you are a student athlete, where you're currently an honors student, whether you are planning to apply for a housing accommodation through accessibility and disability resources, whether you think that you might transfer at the end of the year but aren't really quite sure. Everyone should be doing the housing application available on Housing Self-Service. It's going to take you through similar questions as your first year. You'll be able to update any sort of personal information. You'll be able to take a look at the emergency contacts and addresses that you had previously submitted, be able to make any updates to those as necessary. You'll then have the option to review the GradGuard insurance info, GradGuard being our partner that we use for renter's insurance. As a reminder, Xavier is not responsible for any damage or things that occur. It's also possible that your parents, guardians, or supporters are using some sort of other outlet for which to protect your items, but we do provide an option for you to consider. As Lori mentioned, you'll first need to complete the housing application prior to then receiving the welcome message from My College Roomie. And so while you might be inclined just to go back into My College Roomie and log back in, you won't be able to yet until you do the housing application. So please make sure that you are completing those steps in order. It's also not instantaneous. So Lori mentioned that it's really important to plan ahead and to sort of not do things at the last minute. Sometimes students will apply and then say, I just applied 10 minutes ago, I'm not able to get into My College Roomie. The two do not communicate instantly, but they are communicating 3 times a day, which are listed there. So keep that in mind as you're completing these steps about when you'll be able to move on to the next phase. The housing application deadline is not Tuesday, February 20th, as listed here. It is Monday, February 19th. The Tuesday, February 20th deadline here is for roommate group forming. Speaking of roommate group forming, you will have the option to form a roommate group. Again, you have until Tuesday, February 20th at 10 a.m. to do so. The maximum size that you can make for your roommate group is 8 students total. So yourself plus 7 other individuals. This will be a little bit different. For those of you that recall your first year, we asked that you only pair up with 1 individual, but now as you're heading into sophomore year, we're really expanding that pool of possibilities. It is important to note though, however, that most spaces on campus hold 4 students total. Banger Hall, Coleman Hall, Commons, Village. The exception of more than 4 is really only for Justice Hall suites of 6 and 8 individuals. Here are just a few reminders. This is likely familiar to you from your first year, but as you go into My College Roomie, you'll be able to edit your profile, add a photo, update any social media handles that you're using in order to connect with one another. You'll be able to complete or update the questionnaire that you've previously submitted. Again, there are two scrolling bars when you're doing that. The first one is your response versus the second one being your comfort level related to the question. And then, of course, you'll be messaging and sending friend request and ultimately roommate request to your friends. Even if you're going random or individual, and you're not wanting to make a group, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to, but at the very least, we would ask that you do your profiling questionnaire, just because it's helpful for your potential future roommates to be able to refer back to that and learn some more information about you as the time comes.
As Tim was talking about the size limits by building, he mentioned Justice and some of the other buildings, but I just want to kind of lay it out for you. If you have 4 people who want to live together, the best locations for you would be Bangor, Coolman, Commons, or Village, if you don't want to live with anybody that you don't know. If you want to live with just one other person, Manor House is a great option. For 3 people, we have apartments at University Apartments, which is located across from Bangor Hall. And if you have a group of 6 or 8, those options are available in Justice Hall. Certainly, if you are going through with less than that, you can sign up for those spaces, but you will end up living with others who you may not know. And so we're trying to take that out of our process as much as possible.
So Justice Hall Suites. So we have made some changes this academic year to how we plan to fill Justice Hall Suites, and we're really basing that off of several years of student feedback that we received. We're trying to make it a little bit more streamlined, sort of open up the process, ensure that you're living with folks that you do know instead of potentially going into a suite and having other students. So we're switching it up a little bit. So that students that are interested in Justice Hall will be able to form groups of either 6 or 8 students, because again, most of the suites in Justice Hall either hold 6 students or they hold 8 students. 90% of those suites are double bedrooms. So it'll either be 3 double bedrooms, everyone's got a roommate, or it'll be 4 double bedrooms and everyone has a roommate. Priority for justice will be given to full groups of 6 or 8. So individuals that have made a full group of 6 or a full group of 8 will have that priority ability to be randomly selected to go and live in Justice Hall. What we're going to do is take those lists of full groups and we're going to randomly pre-select folks for a suite. In the information that was sent out by email this afternoon, there was a PDF attached that shares more about how many suites total will be available in Justice Hall. For the 8-person suites, there are 20 of those suites that'll be in the housing selection process. For the suites that hold 6 individuals in them, there will be 45 of those suites total in the housing selection process. So we're going to take 20 groups of 8 and 45 groups of 6 and randomly pre-select those groups to live in a Justice Hall suite. If a group is pre-selected, they agree to live in the suite assigned. So they will not have the ability to indicate a floor preference, a side of the building or anything like that. If you're interested in Justice Hall suite and you're forming that full group or 6, you're pretty much saying, it doesn't matter to me, we're just happy to be living in the Justice Hall suite. Now, we understand that there could potentially be more than 20 groups of 8 and more than 45 groups of 6 that'll be interested in justice. Unfortunately, it happens every academic year. Justice Hall only holds about 500 students, and there are about 1,100 students participating in this housing selection process. So inevitably, unfortunately, not everyone that wants to live in justice will inevitably not be able to. So if a group is not randomly selected for a Justice Hall suite, they will have several days sort of to discuss and figure out what their backup plans are, and they will receive room selection times just as the other students in the process to then go and select space somewhere else on campus. We also recognize, though, that there might be smaller groups who aren't sure how to form a larger group or who they all want to live with. There might be individuals out there who'd like to live in justice, but they can't think of 5 or 7 other folks off the top of their head who they'd want to live with. we have some options for you as well. So one option is to use My College Roomie to be connecting with one another. I'm sure there will be individuals on My College Roomie sort of posting that they're looking for X number of individuals to fill their group. Those are great people to chat with, sort of make those connections, potentially join their roommate group. But we'll also have a list here in the Residence Life office, which is available currently and will be available until end of the day on February 16th, that Friday, for folks to come and sign up. So maybe you feel very adaptable, you feel very flexible, you don't mind having random roommates, you can come and join that list. And then from there, we'll use that to also form full groups of 6 or full groups of 8 to also be eligible to be pre-selected for one of those suites.
I saw we already have a couple on one of those lists too.
We've had some folks come in already to sign up. Just going to leave this slide up for a few moments so folks can read through. I can take a picture if helpful, or it'll be posted later on as well. But also a lot more details in the 2 emails that students have since received, as well as the guide that was attached to this afternoon's message.
So for most students, everything that we have gone over is pretty self-explanatory and pertains to their situations. But sometimes there are students who have different scenarios, and we like to also provide them guidance. So if a student believes that they're going to transfer or withdraw from the university for next year, and they are not required to select a room, I would encourage you to be 100% sure. So if you haven't been accepted somewhere else, and there's a chance that you might come back to Xavier, I would fully encourage you to go through the housing selection process. You can always let us know later, and we will remove you from your assigned housing without charge, without the cancellation fee, if you are transferring or withdrawing from the university. For some students, they may have a friend who maybe they're currently commuting and they've decided they want to live on campus next year. For that situation, you should have that student email Tim at his email address listed there, Griffin T5, by Monday, February 12th, and he will add them to the process. They will then need to go in and complete their application. They'll go ahead and do the My College Roomie and pair up with you and your group, and they will be ready to go prior to selection. We know we have quite a few students who are applying to be RAs. And often they will say, should I go ahead and apply? And the answer is yes, because if you're selected as an RA, you still need to have your housing application signed. And if you are not selected as an RA, you should be already talking to other people about who you might live with. I know that can feel like you're a little bit in limbo, but our RA selection process will be completed prior to the housing selection process. We make sure to do that every year to give folks time so that they can adjust if they're not selected for the position. Another question we get quite often is, I was a member of the honors community in Banger Hall this year, and I would like to continue being in the honors community. Is there an option for me for next year? And the answer is no. In the past, we had offered that, but students had various places that they wanted to live, and there wasn't enough interest in one specific location for us to continue doing honors housing for upper class students. Many of those students have formed a great community with each other and will probably end up living with each other. And so they'll be in a suite together, or they'll be in an apartment together. And so they will have their own honors community there. And we have communicated this with the honors program, and they are in full support. If for some reason you are withdrawing from the university, I want to go back to this. Please email Tim. Again, his email address is right there under his photo. Please provide him with your name, ID number, and the reason you are not planning to return. And he will remove you from the process so that you don't keep getting all of the information. There's going to be a lot of emails in the next few weeks. If you know that you're withdrawing from the university and not returning, just go ahead and let us know. We will want you to reach out to your assistant or associate dean of your academic college to let them know as well. And as I said before, you will not be charged the $1,000 cancellation fee. I just want to reiterate again, unless you are 100% sure that you are leaving, I encourage everybody to go through the housing selection process. and we can manage it on the back end if for some reason you do. And that could be study abroad, could be withdrawing, could be transferring, etc.
Mhm. If you're not already currently following us, particularly on our Instagram, Twitter or X, or Facebook, then I would strongly encourage you to follow us on those social media channels. We really, during room selection time, post a lot of information on them. And so it's just another great way to get some resources, particularly on the actual room selection days. We'll post updates regarding space and how space is looking in various locations, when a building becomes full and things of that nature. So particularly during those 2 days of room selection, it's really great to be checking out those social media outlets as well. All right, we're going to open it up for questions and answers. So if you have any questions that you'd like to add into the chat, we will certainly get to as many of those as possible.
Looks like we may have done a really good job and answered all the questions. Or people are just typing.
Good question, Andrew. Andrew asked, is it difficult to get into the Commons? Andrew, it's really hard to say. It is certainly one of our most popular housing options. Everyone wants a single bedroom. It's particularly a popular option for our upper class students who have already participated in their housing selection process for next year. But there's still space in the Commons. I've purposely set aside space to make sure that sophomores have the option to live there as well. Whether or not it'll be available during a particular student selection time is really hard to say. That really depends on when a student selection time is, what the other options are that the students ahead of them have selected. What is sort of the popular option of a particular year can really sort of depend. But it's certainly one of the most popular options on campus and highly desirable. I will say that for students who have maybe made their selection into a location and maybe it wasn't their preferred spot, we also will have wait lists for each building that are available. And so once students have made their selection and been assigned somewhere for next year, they have the ability to go onto the wait list. So for instance, if someone was interested in Commons and unable to secure space, they can go on the Commons wait list. So much will change between the end of February and the beginning of August. There will be students participating who then, like Lori mentioned, maybe go and study abroad. There will be students who maybe have selected but then don't return to Xavier. And so those wait lists are a really great option for folks as the summer unfolds. We try to make as many adjustments as possible and have found good success the last few years in sort of making that magic happen. I know it can be a little bit nerve-wracking. It can be difficult to wait, but patience when on the wait list really goes a long way in giving us the time and ability to hopefully make as many folks' dreams come true. Great question. When is the first selection time? So the first selection time will start on Monday, February 26th at 9 a.m. So they'll run from 9 to 5 on that Monday and then 9 to 5 also on that Tuesday, the 27th of February.
Any other questions folks might have?
Do you still have to form a roommate group if you plan on a single room? That's a good question, Anna. The answer is somewhat dependent on whether you're trying to live with friends who are also potentially trying to get a single. So if you're all trying to get single rooms and there are 4 of you, you would still want to form as a group on My College Roomie. If you are just interested in as an individual in trying to secure space in a single room, but you don't care about who you are going to live with, then you don't need to do anything as it relates to making a roommate group. There's a question about, are there single rooms in Justice? There are some suites of 6 that have single bedrooms in them. So if a group of 6 is pre-assigned into one, that'll be indicated when that selection is made and sort of what their room type is. I do anticipate, though, that the singles in Justice are popular just as singles in Commons are. So I'm sure that they will also be used as we look to make people's housing accommodations. You're welcome. Well, certainly, if you have other questions or you think of things, we are certainly here to be a resource. You can reach out to myself, to Lori, to the general Res Life account. We always see a few more in-person visitors this time of year as well up here in the Musketeer mezzanine. And then also, of course, the wonderful resources that we have are available out there for you as well. If there's anyone on the call that wanted to maybe ask a specific question but didn't want to do it in the group setting, we can certainly stick around for a few minutes here as well. So folks can ask that. And then once this session has been posted online, we'll make sure to share that out with folks as well. But otherwise, I hope that you all have a great evening and really appreciate you all joining us this evening.
Thanks for joining us and best of luck through the process.